Well, hello, you fine people out there. Welcome back to the channel. Well, today's video is going to be kind of a hodgepodge of different subjects. We'll talk a little bit about some typewriter-related stuff, a little bit about office supply junky subject matter, and other things. So, hey, stay tuned, please. Well, I've received in the mail in the last few weeks a number of internet care packages from some of you guys out there. And where do you start? Well, let's see. We're going to start with this package from Gregory Short, and he gave me a package of different kinds of pins, which we'll look at here shortly. And Gregory is a talented artist, and he makes his own postcards from some of his art that he's done, which is very cool. We'll look at those here shortly. Gregory has also made these things called book pads, and these are a combination of a little notepad that functions as a bookmark, which is a cool idea. I love that. And it's getbookpads.com is the website. And then, of course, Gregory also sent me some pictures of some thermal typewriters. These are Fuji Instax pictures of thermal typewriters with thermal paper in them. And he gave me also a pack of a little piece of fanfold thermal printer label. This is the kind of labels that you would use when you're doing shipping labels, right, for packages, if you're an internet seller or whatever. But also, Gregory had recently given me a roll, kind of a letter width roll of EKG thermal paper. And I featured this on a previous video where I made this little makeshift pizza box cardboard roll holder. But this thermal paper with a little light red grid on it is really kind of nice to use with thermal typewriters. And so this was sort of the whole care package that Gregory Short sent me. Let's look at these pins a little bit closer, shall we? Well, the first pin that Gregory sent me was this Otto brand Fude Ball 1.5. Probably not pronouncing it right. It's a 1.5 millimeter ball pin. It writes okay. It's not great, but it's an interesting pin nonetheless. This is the kind of pins that are more commonly found in Japan, I think. And I'll do a writing sample here briefly. Then the next one was a rolling writer. This is just a simple Pentel rolling writer pen. And, you know, it's just a basic rolling writer. It's just a basic kind of gel pen. And then the third one was kind of surprising. It's a Bic Velocity 1.6 ballpoint. And these are, you know, inexpensive ballpoints. They have kind of a semi-transparent body so you can kind of see how much ink you have left. It has a rubberized grip. And it has a very fat tip to the cartridge, and a very, very smooth gliding ballpoint tip, which is very fun. And then lastly, this is probably the biggest surprise, Gregory sent me this Lamy Safari, and it includes a converter, which I currently have it inked up. So this is the Triumph Clairefontaine paper I'm going to be using. This is the Fude Ball 1.5 pen, and let's see how this works. Manually focus the camera. So it is a really wide tip, right? And also, you might be able to tell here, it doesn't necessarily flow that well, the ink. It's an interesting pen. It almost feels like the ink is a little watery, and on some different kinds of papers, it has a problem flowing. It almost looks like there's the ink is hydrophobic almost to the paper, but it's an interesting ink. I think this pen is really more for kind of like illustration and artwork, not necessarily the kind of pen that you would want to write with. But you know, it's interesting. It has a very smooth tip, and the tip of it, actually the size of it, reminds me very much of the Bic Velocity 1.6. Very similar size tips, which is a good segue into the Bic pen itself. There's nothing spectacular about the writing experience. It is a ballpoint pen. The line it makes is very consistently like any old Bic ballpoint, and actually the line weight is surprisingly narrower than you would think for a 1.6 millimeter nib or tip. What I do like about this pen, however, is I like the smoothness of the way the tip rolls on the paper. it's super smooth and easy to roll. So if you're interested in ballpoint pens, I like the Velocity 1.6. It just has an interesting feel to it. Now, the third pen he gave me was this Pentel Rolling Writer. The Pentel Rolling Writer. And this is a nice gel pen. This has a blue ink, of course, and it's just a very smooth pen. I think it's probably not quite as nice of a tip as a Pilot G2, for instance, but I like the feel of it. And I think the line weight is just a little bit less consistent when you're doing these kind of crosshatch things. So it may not be the ideal art pen, but it does write really smoothly. I think it's a good letter writing pen. Now, let's get to the Lamy Safari, right? So, the thing about the Lamy Safari, so I originally inked this pen up with some Pilot blue-black ink. And what I noticed, first of all, I should mention, this is an EF nib, which I believe is extra fine, if I'm not mistaken. If I am mistaken, correct me, please. But the line weight was almost like a medium using the Pilot blue-black ink. And I suspect perhaps the Pilot ink is really built for Pilot nibs, which generally the Japanese nibs are narrower than German nibs. So I've instead I put some Private Reserve velvet black ink in this converter cartridge, and it definitely gives me now a more finer line weight. And so yeah, this is a very consistent writing fountain pen, very consistent with the other Lamy Safaris that I've had, and they're generally very good pens for steel nibbed fountain pens. So I think these are just generically very reliable, inexpensive, relatively inexpensive fountain pens for being a big name brand. Of course, nowadays, there's a lot of Chinese-made fountain pens that are getting better and better. But this is a pretty decent pen, and I like the color and everything. And, you know, I appreciate Gregory sending this to me. It really is great. Thank you very much. And this is a good opportunity maybe to showcase some of Gregory's artwork that he sent me in these postcards. So I like that sunset postcard. This green one is really interesting, as well as this one here. This is very cool. And here's a very exciting, dynamic postcard. These are, you know, very neat. They're actually quite thick in terms of cardstock grade. So it's artwork and design by Gregory Short, gregoryshort.com. Very cool. I appreciate it. And then these little book pads. I have not opened the package at all. Let's see if we can do that. Let's open the book pads. Ah, yes. Focus. So it's really cool. It has this just nice kind of patterned art, and the pages have kind of a dot grid lined system, right? And there's just probably maybe 8 or 10 pages, I don't know, even less than that. Just a little book for taking notes on, but it also functions as a bookmark to put into your book. And there is the other one. That's a nice kind of a paisley pattern, right? That's a really neat idea, Gregory. Very ingenious, and I like this flowery pattern as well. You could definitely see these would be nice gifts to give away to people who are readers, voracious readers, and also voracious note takers. Very cool, Gregory. Thank you a lot for sending these to me. Next, I'd like to showcase these inexpensive gel pens that my friend Ethan gave to me. These are Keiko Rockets, and Ethan has been on a real kick to explore writing instruments, and he turned me on to these. It has a really nice kind of a modernist symmetrical design between the front and the rear of the pen. And this white one is using the standard nib, or tip, I should say, of the Keiko Rocket default cartridge. It is a black writing, thin line, and it is a little bit of kind of scratchy feeling, right? Not as smooth as a Pilot G2 cartridge or whatever, but I have this other one that's the same kind of design, Keiko Rocket, but Ethan has put another different kind of gel cartridge into this one, and forgive me for not remembering which one it is. I think it's an Energel cartridge, and it's a blue cartridge, and a little thicker line weight than the default Keiko Rocket, but this one is a super smooth writer as far as gel pens. But I really like the styling on these Keiko Rocket pens. When you retract the cartridge, it just has this real interesting symmetrical design to it that's really neat. And yeah, these make good little kick-around pens to stick in your journal book. And I like having actually the two different line weights and two different colors, having the black thin line weight and the thicker blue line weight. It makes really nice for sketching. Well, next up in this little hodgepodge of a video is I got a care package from Bill McLean of Kalamazoo, Michigan. He sent me a nicely typewritten letter, and so he sent me some interesting things. He sent me some thermal fax paper, several rolls of that, and along with the thermal fax paper, he sent me this nifty spring tool. This is for hooking little springs, which will be really handy for working on typewriters. Thank you, Bill, very much for that. And he also sent me a couple rolls of this 4.5-inch wide, how does that, 4.5 inches? Just about 4 3/8 inches wide thermal fax paper, the narrower kind that is really useful, I think, for blog articles where you want a narrower column, right? And so I got a couple of rolls of that, and these are brother thermal cartridges for the EP20, and these are like as rare as hen's teeth. The proverbial hen's teeth right here. I was really anxious to try out the narrow fax paper. So I took this roll, I opened up one of the rolls of the narrow fax paper, and I decided I wanted some kind of a little dispenser to hold it in other than just sitting it behind the typewriter on the table. Maybe it would roll off onto the floor or something. And then I went out into the recycle bin out in the garage, and we recycle cardboard containers, right, from stuff we buy. And this is just a little sandwich baggy container, right? A little cardboard sandwich baggy container. But I was looking at the size of it, and I thought, you know, this is kind of interesting. I opened up the end of it, and I put the roll of paper like this into the box, like a little holder, and then then you can pull out the paper here and use it as a little thermal paper dispenser. So, you know, I didn't think this was a revolutionary enough idea to make a separate video about it, but, you know, you can use these kind of containers for that purpose, right? And maybe cut out some of the opening a little bit wider so the paper feeds through a little bit easier. But I went and used this roll of paper on my Brother EP43 and came up with, you know, about almost 2 feet of typing. And I really like this paper. It is about maybe the same thickness or maybe slightly thicker than the Staples brand fax paper. It has a nice dark thermal printing to it, so sometimes the inexpensive fax paper doesn't print as dark as the thicker letter size sheets. But this is a pretty good paper, and I really like the width of it. It is almost ideal for blog articles where you want your lines to be, the text to be larger when it fits into your blogging template. But hey, that was a pretty cool gift, Bill. I really appreciate it. But I was also going to mention, since we're talking about using makeshift cardboard containers for rolls of thermal paper, grab yourself an empty aluminum foil type of box that has the little aluminum tear strip, and you put a roll of this regular letter size paper in here, and now all of a sudden you got yourself an instant little dispenser pack for thermal paper that you can just close up and store it along with your typewriter in your typewriter bag, and then you have this tear strip that you can use to tear off the sheets of paper after you're done writing. So you can repurpose little containers and things like this for the purposes of thermal typewriters, I think, quite easily. Well, next up on the list here, I got a nice letter a while ago from Chris McKellar of Salt Lake City, Utah. And then I got a postcard in the mail from him. And what I think is so cool about it, it is, you know, I looked at, O'Doul's beer postcard. Then I looked on the back and realized, oh, this is made from a cardboard carton. And all of a sudden, the lights came on. I realized, oh, this is a whole nother interesting project, making your own postcards. Well, the first thing you should know about doing postcards is the postage in the United States for postcard rate is cheaper than first-class letter rate. But a postcard, by definition, has to conform to these particular sizes. No smaller than this width and height, and no larger than this width and height. And so I decided to go out into my recycle bin once again and look for kind of cardboard cartons that might serve as potential postcard material. So let's see, what did I come up with? Well, we actually ended up having, of all things, for a healthy diet, we ended up having a cardboard carton for Hamburger Helper. Yes, that's right. If you guys are living outside the United States, don't know what Hamburger Helper is, well, it's an inexpensive kind of a quick to make meal with macaroni noodles and some spices and powdered cheese that you provide the ground hamburger and the onions or whatever, and then you add the other ingredients. But so I took this carton of Hamburger Helper and cut these cards to conform to the sizes of the U.S. postcard size. And then I took my little corner punch and actually rounded the corners on these. So twin pack. I think that's a cool little postcard. And then we have the skillet of ready-to-eat Hamburger Helper here, which is kind of a fun little card. And then we have the postcard that has the recipe on how to do Hamburger Helper. This would be a fun card to send to somebody. And then the back of the carton, which is kind of double cheeseburger macaroni. I think that's just hilarious. This kind of speaks to a certain part of the American culture, I think. But also, I looked in my recycle bin, and I actually found a carton from Alaska Brewing Company, their Alaskan Ale or whatever. And so this was the back of the carton, right? It's not a spectacularly beautiful card there, but look at these. Oh, yeah. Now, there's a postcard, right? Alaskan Brewing Company. Isn't that cool? With the artwork on these beer cartons. So, yeah, you have instant postcards. There's an idea for you guys. I don't necessarily want to promote the drinking of alcoholic beverages or the eating of Hamburger Helper, but there's a lot of different kinds of cardboard containers that we consume in our daily lives that you can repurpose for making postcards. Next up, I wanted to show you this gift from my friend Bill. This is a Leatherman tool. Now, back in the day, I think back in the 1990s, Leatherman tools became very, very popular all of a sudden. I never owned an actual Leatherman branded multi-tool. I owned some really inexpensive thing that easily bent when you tried putting it under load. But this is the Leatherman multi-tool. I don't think this particular model or version is made anymore. So it's a very well-made tool, much better made than the aftermarket knockoff ones that I was buying back in the 90s. But the handle part feels like cast metal. It has a cast feel, not stamped, right? So it has a really nice pair of folding pliers, and you might notice the tip of it is aligned quite well. There's not a real much a gap at all in there, so just the accuracy of the machining is really neat. There's a pair of jaw-like pliers and a little pair of wire cutter blades in there, which is pretty cool. Well, a couple other miscellaneous things we should talk about before we close for the day, since this is a hodgepodge video. Well, you might remember that I've been using this little notebook, a quarter-size notebook that my friend Ethan and I made earlier in the year 2020. In fact, it was March of 2020 when I first made this. I just used it up. I finished it up like a week or two ago. And so I had been using this Trader Joe's grocery sack protective sleeve. You guys remember doing that in school if you're old like me, protecting your school books with paper sacks. I think what we're going to do is we're going to take our knife, our Opinel French-made craftsman's knife, and we're going to slice off the Trader Joe's cover to reveal the original cover to this notebook, and then we can archive the notebook. But also, A couple weeks ago, I was over at my friend Ethan's, and we had made another notebook. This is sort of a half-size notebook made of the similar 32-pound laser paper, and it's hand-stitched. This time, we put some adhesive black vinyl shelf liner on around the cover to make a nice kind of protective cover that is fairly water moisture resistant. So I had this notebook that I was going to start using, but then Ethan had kind of got me into going over to my nearest Walmart of all places and buying one of these Exceed brand dot grid journal books, and these are super inexpensive, and I hadn't really tried a dot grid journal before, and so I decided, I would just maybe start the dot grid journal now, and I can go to my handmade one when I use this one up. So we have like a changing of the guard in terms of notebooks. Well, first of all, I gotta say that I was fairly amused when I first put the cover on this notebook. This is a Trader Joe's grocery sack, and I just thought the artwork of these children that kind of look like starving children from some English novel. Anyway, I thought it was just very interesting, right? So, okay, we're going to slice this cover off, hopefully without destroying the actual notebook cover, and also without, oh yes, you guys remember this? About a year ago? Look at that. Okay, focus. So this was one of these little typewriter note cards that you might be aware of, and I glued this onto this heavy paper cover when I made this. This is kind of a mat board cover that Ethan and I used for this notebook. But hey, this has been a really fun notebook. I enjoyed the process of using this, and really indebted to my friend Ethan for having shown me how to make a hand-stitched notebook. And it was really fun using a bunch of different pens in here, gel pens and fountain pens and things like that, and just documenting my thoughts and everything. So that's cool. And then we have our new notebook, which is the Exceed brand Walmart purchase notebook. This fountain pen that I'm starting with here is the Pilot Plumix stub nib fountain pen. I'm using the, what is it, antique copper, kind of a fountain pen ink. I really like the color of that. And starting to write in this dot grid notebook, it's kind of a new thing for me. But I kind of got to the point where I liked skipping lines so that my descenders on my lines weren't overlapping. It sometimes gets kind of crowded looking when you use it as single line mode. Here I'm testing out several different gel pens and fountain pens, just kind of starting the notebook, not really sure what I'm going to do with it. But anyways, I got a long ways to go. And oh yeah, I got a little kind of a template here for doing little symbols and things like that. And this notebook does have a couple markers, and you know, these are about $5 or something, these dot grid notebooks at Walmart approximately. And then there's this. Well, okay, so we have this very cool looking leather zippered pouch, and it has a really neat two-tone kind of reddish white, and oh yes, that's right, this is an abacus, of course, and you guys know that I like abacuses, but this is not just any abacus. This is a Tomoe soroban, which is one of the more premium brands of abacus. And the thing that's really cool about this, and you probably won't be able to easily see it, the signature of the craftsman who made this soroban is engraved inside the frame of it. And one of the things I love about this particular soroban, well, there's several things. First of all, the quality of workmanship. This is more of a high-end soroban, and the craftsmen who are experienced at making soroban are considered in Japan to be national treasures. That's right, the craftsmen themselves are national treasures. But this has the beautiful construction of the high-end soroban with the metal pins in the frame. If you go here on the bottom frame, you have these kind of metal bushings that support every 3 or 4 rods. It supports the bamboo rods, and then the metal bushings are pinned
right? So they have these wonderful pins in here that hold the frame together. And it's just the beautiful work. The dividing bar has the 3 layers inlaid with the little decimal points. The high-end Japanese exotic wood beads that are hand-polished. And just the level of craftsmanship of these soroban is just wonderful. And so this is probably the finest example of a Japanese soroban that I've had in my collection thus far. Look at the joinery on that. Handmade joinery. Just absolutely beautiful.
Well, this was a fun little hodgepodge of different subject matter. None of these individually would have probably been enough to make a complete video about, but I thought it was fun just to combine this all together as a big mishmash and update of what's going on in my life. What about you guys? What's going on in your lives? How's the year 2021 starting out for you? Well, I hope it's going to be starting out better than the last year did for you. In any event, I hope you guys stay well, stay creative. Have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye for now.